Good morning, everyone. We're going to get started in about 20, 30 seconds here. Thanks for joining us today. Excellent. People rolling in. Lisbon, Portugal, 4 o'clock your time. Fantastic. All right, let's get started. My name is Scott Bolden. I'm community lead and product evangelist here at Product Board, and really excited to be running our Product Makers Community mini conference, Building Products That Matter Together. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started. We all are recording all sessions, so if you can't be around for all of them or want to share this afterwards with a colleague, feel free to catch up on either the recordings in our community or our YouTube posted live streams afterwards. Sessions are about 30 minutes each, include any Q&A time. If you have any more questions afterwards, feel free to create a new topic within our community and we'll be happy to answer them there. And we'll be utilizing the Q&A for questions today, chat for chat. Please make sure though you do select everyone when indicating your chat rather than spamming us as hosts and panelists. We're really excited today to have Melanie Mckay kicking things off. Melanie is the head of product at Not on the High Street, and over her 17-year product career, she's worked on a wide range of products for organizations such as Transport for London, Rightmove, and now Not on the High Street. She's a collaborative leader with an appreciation of common sense and logic, who enjoys understanding user needs and exploring opportunities to solve problems, and like me, is a passionate ultra runner on the side as well. So really excited to have you here, Melanie, today, and I'm going to kick over everything to you to get things started.
Great, thank you. Cool. Let's get my screen shared. Just check you can see that. Fine. Yeah, great, thank you. Cool, so thank you for the intro. Just to kind of repeat the introduction, I guess. As Scott said, I've worked in product for 17 years. I fell into product when I left university. So I studied computing, took the first job that I saw, which was a marketing assistant job. There was a product manager at the company who left, and someone said, "You know about computers, would you like to be a product manager?" And I said, sure. Didn't know what it was, didn't know what it meant. And then spent the next few years trying to figure that out. I don't think anybody really knew. And I think like somebody yesterday, I'm sorry, I can't remember who it was, but it was at the time where there weren't things like conferences and books and blogs and people to learn from. So it was kind of a learn as you go. And then thankfully, when all that stuff started to come out, I was able to go, oh, phew, I'm kind of doing it along the right lines. And there are some things I can definitely improve. So over my career, I've come to realize a few things, something that Scott just said, which is that common sense and logic are not things that everybody has, but something that product people tend to have in abundance, and how valuable that is. The other thing I've come to realize is how much I value collaboration. And it's a bit cheesy to say, but I wholeheartedly believe that the best solutions come from working together. And what I've realized though is that everyone, myself included, who says things like that, say the words, but the actions don't always reflect that. And sometimes going back to basics can help move things forward. I actually went through this talk this morning with a colleague of mine who said, oh, you've just reminded me I should have done this session with the team that I'm working in. And I said, yep, just writing the slides has reminded me already of a few things I haven't done in my 6 months of being at North. So I'm kind of saying this while making a mental note to go and do some of these things myself. So good reminder, even if you've been doing something for a long time. So what I want to do is share some kind of back to basics tips and some examples, and hopefully a couple of tools. I've put a few things in here and a couple of links to places where you can find out more about them, and hopefully it will help you work more effectively with those around you. And the other thing I'm trying to get across in this is how to also avoid what can happen, which is you decide to work, or you want to work collaboratively, but then you end up in this strange position where you're, I guess you're a bit paralyzed because you're designing everything by committee and moving on mass. So actually establishing who's doing what early on can help with that as well. So I'll talk a bit about those two things. And before I start that again, we're already kind of waffling, but what I wanted to do is clarify a bit about what I believe products are here for. And when I say I believe, that's because despite 17 years of experience, reading lots of blogs, reading lots of books, listening to lots of podcasts. It still happens that every single company I go into, product is done differently and people have different expectations and different approaches. So product management is here to create products that deliver value to a business and addressing customer needs. But the realities of how you do that, I think maybe is a bit different. So I think we're here to find the sweet spot between our customer needs, our business goals, our what's actually possible for us to do, and the balance is that kind of understanding of problems and opportunities. So usually we see the Venn diagram that's got UX, business, technology, and then product in the middle. It's not that I think that's untrue. It's just that I think it doesn't describe exactly what's happening in those different areas or what we're getting from those areas. And I'm pointing out the obvious here, I suspect, by saying this when you're talking about a Venn diagram, but I think it's important to use a Venn diagram when you describe product, because I think those overlapping parts are the key part. They're the sweet spot. So where where understanding the customer needs and understanding what's possible overlap, that's kind of where the magic's happening. And it's something that all disciplines bring something to the party, but product being collaborative and having that holistic view, kind of, it's a skill that not everybody has. I think that's super common for people in product roles to feel some kind of imposter syndrome and question your value. In my opinion, being able to focus on those overlapping parts is a superpower, and that's the thing that products are here and do very well. So if I go on to the back to basics side of things, starting with like kind of 5 key things, I guess: respect, language, time, trust, and building real relationships. So respect might seem obvious, but starting with respect. So an ex-colleague and I did a talk for a conference a few years ago. We also talked about respect there. It was a completely different talk. We were talking about becoming product-led as an organization, but this is still vital at this point. And I think the thing is that when you're working with people, you assume respect. So you would assume people respect you. You know that you respect those around you. But actually, I think it's going a step further than just saying the word, I respect this person. It's actually acting on that. So taking the time to understand what people actually do. So not, oh, they work in sales and all people who work in sales do the same thing. But what does that actually mean? What's their day-to-day look like? Are they working with new clients, old clients, people they've worked with for a long time? How is their team set up? I've been at Not on the High Street now for 6 months. The marketing team here is different to the marketing team at Rightmove. They're both marketplaces, but they have very different setups. People have different roles. You could be forgiven for arriving somewhere and going, oh, marketing manager, I know what they do. I know how to interact with them. Actually going, let me understand what you do. What do you bring to the party? What is your skill set? And also being able to understand, just because someone has a certain job title, they can have other skills that you could be learning from or utilizing them, and taking the time to get to know people and understanding their setup shows respect. It will also hopefully encourage people to do the same thing back to you. You're able to share where you're coming from. Kind of, as you know, I work for Not on the High Street. It's a curated marketplace. We work with small businesses to sell gifting products. I started working here because I have a personal connection with my parents, my in-laws are partners of Not on the High Street. It's not unusual for people to understand that in a marketplace you've got the buyer and the seller, but often people forget about actually the company side of things. So the account managers, the curators, the support teams, and they're all part of the ecosystem. And you can put the customer first, but you still need to understand what the people around you are doing. So, and maybe an obvious one, but something I think sometimes can slip. And then language. Yesterday, I was in a meeting with half the product team, half the marketing team, maybe not quite half, but a good number of people. And actually, it was the first time that a few people had met. Some people are new, people have been on maternity leave, come back. And we were there talking about the crossover of 2 of our OKRs. So it was a meeting of 2 kind of cross-functional teams. And throughout the meeting, we took the time to clarify vocabulary. And it took one person feeling a bit awkward and saying, can I just check what you mean by X? And then that continued throughout the session. And it meant that it saves us huge amounts of time in the long run. everyone will have had those experiences where you're in a meeting, you've definitely agreed something, you walk out, the next time you come back in, everyone's talking about something different. And it's because you haven't taken the time. It's not the only reason, but one of the reasons is you haven't taken the time to make sure you're in the same place. When you say X, do you mean this? Yes, brilliant. We've got that agreed. Now move on to the next thing. And it happens time and time again that happens. An analogy I often use in general around roadmaps is, or planning, or basically anything that I do in my job, you need to understand where you are now before you can work out where you're going, especially if you're working with other people. So if I dropped us all in the middle of, I will use England, but if I'm using the middle of England and said get to Brighton, and gave us everyone a map, the first thing we've got to do is understand where in England we are so we can work out what direction we're going in. That's true of language too. Are we saying the same things? Have we got the same goals? Get that to the same point, and then you can move forward together. Time. Take time, make time, give time up, slow down. There's often a huge amount of pressure on us to do the next thing. I was talking to one of my team today, and she was saying, maybe we could bring this meeting forward because people are asking about it. But in reality, it needs to wait so that she's got the time to focus on what she's doing now. And that's true of us all the time, I think, in our roles. We're often time poor, and therefore we don't necessarily take the time to get on the same page. So another example, actually, again from yesterday, was aligning with the tech leadership within NOS on some structured data work that we're doing, and making sure that we all understand collectively the value of this piece of work. What problems are we solving? And the way we did this was actually to talk about, okay, well, what are the customer problems? What are the partner problems? What are the business problems? What are the technical problems? And just taking that time solved endless previous conversations that we've had, because we got together, we shared, we made sure we were on the same page, and then we can move forward. So even when you feel like you don't have the time, find it and make it, and look at your diary as a whole. And then trust, a bit like with respect, you want to believe that everybody is going to trust you, and you want to trust those around you. I think the starting point, always assume positive intent, because you want the same of you. It's easy to go, oh, they must mean this. Let's assume that people are working positively and are trying to move things forward. And I think the other thing that helps build trust with the people that you're working with, that helps with collaboration, is that side of kind of the vulnerability side of things. So open up. I'm not saying tell everybody your life story. You definitely don't need to do that, but it doesn't have to be all business all the time, no conversation, no personality. To build trust with people, you need to build a rapport. And if you build that trust and you build that rapport, you're then able to challenge each other a bit more easily. You're able to ask questions of each other. You can open up and say, actually, I don't think I understand what you mean by this thing. And then you can move forward together. So look at building trust and looking at ways that you can do that. And I guess everything I've said so far is about building those relationships with people that you work with. It's actually obviously cyclic. If you take the time to build the relationships, you'll build the trust. Everyone feels comfortable sharing ideas, sharing concerns. Then you're building more trust. You're building deeper relationships, stronger relationships. You're building relationships across teams. The power of two people working together, say between product and technology, if there's been friction there in the past, is that then works for other people. So other people working in product and technology can benefit from the time that you've taken to build those relationships. So they're kind of, I guess, the easy bits. Let's have trust, let's take time, let's build relationships, let's have respect for those around us. What I also want to do is then talk about, okay, that's great. What about in practice? What are some tools or some ideas that you can use to help actually achieve these things? And so I'm going to talk about, I'm calling this mapping your ecosystem. People call it different things. People call them mind maps. You call them whatever you like. I'll use the names that I use personally. It's contracting, having a manifesto, a team canvas, talking about roles and responsibilities and ways to do that. A glossary, car parks, scheduling, and pre-mortems. So, excuse me. So map your ecosystem. This is I keep saying it feels like an obvious thing I could say, but I guess that's the point of me talking about going back to basics. And I nearly left this off. It's actually when I joined Scott on the call earlier, I said, just changing something on the slides, because I nearly didn't put this in. But I think it's probably one of the most important things, and it's the most helpful thing I did when I started at Not on the High Street, and that was to start to map out the world that I was joining. So the document I created is probably unusable, but it's not like I could give it to someone else and say, when I started at Not, I did this. But it has been my lifeline the whole way through. So I met lots of different people who told me lots of different things. They used a whole bunch of acronyms. I had no idea what they were. So I wrote everything down. I highlighted things I wasn't sure on. I reflected if I'd really understood what people were saying. I looked at, what was their team, and how does that team work, and how do those things connect together? I don't think I've understood. Looked at their objectives, their ways of working. Then I went back, I met more people, I refined what I was writing. I'm quite a visual person in my way that I learn or that I understand things. I draw constantly. I've been waving a pencil around the whole way through this, but I've always got paper and pen in front of me. Nothing I draw resembles an official looking diagram, but it helps me understand, and I use those diagrams or my drawings to sense check with others. So I bounce my understanding off of the people I was meeting. Am I following you? Have I understood correctly? Is this connected to this? And like I said, it's not usable by other people, but it was something I could use to understand. But then I could build that relationship with people by showing them that I was doing this. I was taking the time to understand them and their expectations. I was understanding their expectations of me. So it's a simple tool for you, but you can use it when if you share it as part of kind of collaboration and relationship building with people. And then contracting, there are many different examples of this out there. If you just Google it and you'll find different examples. I've run a similar session to the one outlined on Atlassian, so I've used that example here, but do some research, find one that adapt them, or find one that works best for you or your setup. But essentially run a session with a team that you're working with. So this doesn't have to be, actually, I'm often not talking about working directly with engineers because I tend to not work directly with them anymore. But you could do it with a team of engineers you're working with, or whoever the people are that you're in a team with. So first off, what's important? Have a reflection time. What's important to you when you think of us working as a team? And then share that. So everyone does that in isolation, not together. And then share those reflections. Key thing there is you're sharing yourself, but you're also actively listening and you're hearing different perspectives and seeing if that might change your mind. And then you start to draft. So each person create an agreement or a couple of agreements you think would lead to us working successfully as a team. Then start to combine them, group them, these things similar to each other. Then you vote. Where you agree, brilliant, you've got some statements. If there's something that you disagree on, someone's made a statement and you say, actually, I really don't agree on this, it's a great time to have a conversation. What would you need to change to make it so that you do agree with it? What would bring you in line? And then share. You need to create a space for this agreement. You've now come out with a set of statements, and you want everyone in the team to make sure they know where it is. So that might mean pinning it to a Slack channel, adding it to your Confluence page, putting it up on a board somewhere it's not going to be lost, because you also need to want to revisit and reflect on it and make sure it's not been lost. So revisit over time. Is it still what you believe? If not, what might you change? Really importantly, when someone new joins the team, you don't just say, hey, here's our contracting that we all did as a team when you weren't here, where we've defined how we want to work together and what our rules of engagement are. You say, what do you think about this? Let's talk you through it. What are your ideas? Is there anything you want to add on to that? It helps bring someone in on what you're doing. So I find it a really positive way to get people to kind of share what they want. And I've given 2 examples, which I feel very strongly about, but don't schedule calls over lunch if possible. It's something I've had as a bad habit most of my career, and I'm now learning to stop doing. And always understand the problem. So make sure we're always talking problem, and then we can move on to the next. They're 2 things I want to be able to do. Another tool is, say, a manifesto. Again, to call it what you like to. I worked on a particularly challenging project at a previous company, and as a mark of solidarity, we gave ourselves a team name. And actually one person went as far as making us little badges, and it was during lockdown. So she then posted them all out to us. And when you're in difficult meetings, you might see a flash of a badge somewhere, and it just meant nothing to anybody else in the room, but that feeling that there was a team behind you or something, it just made such a difference of not feeling like you were alone. And it was something so simple, and it helped break down barriers and for us to work better together. And it was a team of people who hadn't really worked together. And then quite a few years ago, I worked as a product owner in a team, and we had a team charter. So we took time out to discuss what our team meant to us as individuals. We'd been there for different lengths of time, had different backgrounds, had different goals. And sharing those and being open with what we hope for as individuals allowed us to make this manifesto, which we printed out at the time, put it up on the wall. And it made speaking out easier because we'd taken the time to get together as a team. I'm in a steering group right now for one of our OKRs, and we have a theme tune. Actually, we have 2 theme tunes, which means when we get together as a steering group, they're 2. One is a very British 90s song that would mean something to probably anyone who's from Britain, but otherwise no one else at all. And it's helped bring people together who have got from different areas, different backgrounds, different parts of the business, different priorities, different focus areas. And it's just allowed us to be human, really, have a joke, and helps us kind of cement better as a team. So I think working through questions like these, and I'm not suggesting you do all of them or ever, but definitely all of them at once, but it's just about what it means to be a team. So it's not about the goal, it's not the piece of work you're working on, but actually how you want to be as a team. It allows you to be, you might say, let's do a mascot, and then say, go and pick a mascot. And then suddenly you find out that someone's obsessed with sloths, I don't know. So whatever it's going to be. And it's just that human side and building those relationships. So when running a session to create a manifesto, I'd suggest, firstly, as with all sessions actually, plan what outcome you want, share this at the start. Personally, I'm a self-confessed post-it fan, and I do think you can keep it that simple. So pick a topic or a few of these, get people to share their thoughts, group anything that's similar, start to build up a picture of the team, maybe we'll go over and search them. But the idea being, you've thought in advance what you're going to do, you've planned some time out for it, and then come back together and then use this as a thing for your team. And again, someone new joins, you've got a team mascot, explain it to them. There's a team here with a funny name. I have no idea why it's called that. Everyone jokes and goes, oh, it's an in-joke. I feel excluded by that happening. So think about that when new people are starting. Team canvas, you may have seen these before. It's kind of similar concepts to contracting and manifestos, but it's another tool to align on expectations. So kind of get together, what are the things that you want to do? So who are the people and the roles, the common goals, the values, rules and activities. Just another tool you can use. Google Team Canvas, it comes back, so you can look at that. At a previous company, working with a team that was struggling to kind of gel together, we got together in a room and we had these 2 kind of pieces of paper. You had one which was my role, and you had one that was for the person to your right. Everyone just sat down randomly, and you needed to describe, okay, so my role is this, I focus on this, to do this I need this, and I don't do this. And then you did the same to the person next to you. What was fascinating when we did this was that we realized that half the room didn't understand that we had a UX and a UI designer, and that they were doing different things. So that in itself was brilliant. Get together, we put them up on the wall, and then said, okay, let's talk through these, and then had one version at the end. And then we started to map them out. So this is a team I'm in now, actually, this mapping. And what you can see are the connections. Not everybody is connected to everybody else, but we started to map out, what are the relationships between these people? What does that relationship mean? Do they need to talk all the time? Is this, is it a daily check-in? Why is one relationship different to another? And you just start to map them out and understand, okay, my role is to do this, and I'm responsible for this, and I'm connected to these people in this way. So it's just something you can do on a board. You can of course you can do it remotely easily, but it's a great thing to do in the room together, put them up on the wall and walk around. As I have put here, this is officially the most boring slide in my deck. This might seem obvious, but I've specifically called it out because when I talked about sharing language, writing that shared language down can be super, super helpful. Everyone will be used to working, if you're working technology, a whole bunch of, well, anywhere, I guess, a whole bunch of acronyms. I've seen lots of people have a term and a meaning. They've got an acronym. So PVW, that means, and then someone will say that means property web, which is from a previous company. And then I still don't know what property web actually is and where it might be used. So think about when you're defining what a term is, actually explaining it fully, and then keep it in a shared space. It'll make your lives easier, and it means anyone joining the team or a working group later can then go back and look and understand it. So don't just create the shared language, share it. An oldie, but a goodie in my view, car parks or parking lots. I'll go for the British car park. Try and incorporate the concept of a car park into your work as often as possible. I use them during workshops and steering group catch-ups. It's a great way to make sure that someone's point is captured, even if it's not something to concentrate on right now. Rather than kind of assume what everybody means, a quick explanation. Basically, piece of paper on a whiteboard, whatever the place is, draw a picture of a car, write car park on it. And just make it so that something that everyone in the session can see. And while you're working, if someone wants to bring something up that you can't address right then, add it to the car park. And that way you're acknowledging someone's input, you publicly make a note about it, but you park it for now. And that means people's voices are heard, but it also keeps things moving where necessary. Then after the session, make sure you follow up as appropriate. So that might mean scheduling more time. It might mean putting on a future agenda. It might be a one-on-one catch-up to understand more and decide next steps. But you're showing open acknowledgement and you're following up. So you're showing respect and you're building trust. And also be ready to put your own stuff in the car park. If you're facilitating a session, it can be really easy to slip it into your own agenda. Use the car park to keep yourself in check as well. And that will also help build respect from the people that you're working with. This is the second most boring slide. That is obviously not my calendar. I don't know any product person who has a calendar that looks that empty, but this is a calendar nonetheless. When I'm talking about time earlier, schedule the time. Really bad habit I have is going, I don't have any time in the next week, I can't do it, instead of going, let me put something in for a month's time, and then it's already there and it's already blocked out. Scheduling time to organize, to plan, to think through those workshops that you're going to run. If you plan them in advance, you will build something that engages people more, and then you will have more success in building better relationships and developing those with people. So schedule time. And then my last point, hopefully I'm not going to overrun, is just a pre-mortem. And I don't know how many people have used them. I love them. I think these, well, essentially you take a piece of work that you're looking at and you say, okay, it's a year, 2024, 25, whatever you want to say. And this initiative that we're working on has completely failed. What happened? What was the failure? What didn't we do? What issues did we introduce? What problems remain? What were the symptoms? How do we know it failed? When did we realize what do the outcomes mean? Why do the outcomes mean failure? Sorry. And the causes. So what didn't we do that caused us to fail? What did we do that caused us to fail? What incorrect assumptions did we make? And then now, how are we going to mitigate those risks? And this is especially positive for those in a team who find it hard to raise concerns that often are less heard, but almost always have really important things to say. They're usually the quieter members. It builds trust. It shows everyone's being heard. A product owner I worked with at Rightmove ran such an amazing pre-mortem ahead of a huge replatform initiative. And had she not run that session, I fully believe we'd have missed some vital areas of focus, and the project and the piece of work wouldn't have been a success. But even more importantly, people in the team felt able to air their concerns ahead of beginning the work and didn't feel like they were bringing the team down, which then meant they would bring stuff up later. So running a pre-mortem allows you to focus on all the doom and gloom without anyone feeling bad, and people feel heard, and you're continuing to build relationships and trust. And I've put a link in, I think the slides will be shared, I've put a link into a great example. And so basically that's kind of everything that I wanted to cover. Ideally, if you can use some of these tools, you will be able to build those. You'll understand the roles and responsibilities, who's doing what, you understand your team goal. That will stop you moving en masse because you'll already have understood up front what people are doing. Feel free to add me on LinkedIn if anyone wants to chat about anything. I've put my Twitter on there, but as I've said, it's basically mostly around running and not that much about product. Occasionally I do put something about product on there, but feel free to connect. And thank you.
That is awesome. Thank you, Melanie. I know we squeezed that in right exactly at the 30-minute mark.
Sorry.
So yeah, if anybody has any questions, feel free to throw them up in our community. we'll be happy to answer them there afterwards. Melanie, really appreciate you sharing your insights here again into really that collaborative team spirit and doing our best work as teams today.
Thanks so much.
Thanks very much. Yeah, really appreciate having you. I'm going to take you off here as a co-host, and we'll get our next participant up. 2 seconds here. Stephanie, you should be able to come on screen and share. There we are. Oh, there we are. Excellent. Wonderful. While you're getting settled, I'll do a little brief introduction for you. You can take yourself off mute too. So Stephanie, if you haven't not met Stephanie before, particularly on product Twitter, where she's quite active, Stephanie's the director of product for scheduling at Doodle. She's worked in technology for over 20 years and has been building products for over 14 years at companies, including Contentful and PayPal. And she also coaches product teams and leaders globally when she's, I don't know where she finds the time, but has a ton of knowledge here to share today, and really excited to have her sharing her experiences here around high performing teams today.
Thanks for your kind words and the introduction. First, welcome. Good morning, good evening, wherever you are. I'm in Berlin time zone, so it's almost 6 p.m. here. I'm talking today about a topic that is really close to my heart, high performing teams. Why is it so close to my heart? Because I had the opportunity twice to work in a high performing team, and the impact on me and also the value I was able to deliver to our customers was huge. And it was an experience that I would love to have over and over again. So during the past 14 years of working in product, I had the opportunity to not only build products myself, but to also lead product teams and help them to become high performing. And I was not reading plenty of books and doing a master on leadership, people, and organizations, but I also identified pillars that help teams to become high performing, or even better, that help product leaders to understand how they can help their teams to improve their performance. And what I want to share with you today is my view on how we can help teams to perform better. First, starting with the things that you will not learn today. As Scott already pointed out, I'm quite active on Twitter. So what makes a good presentation? Well, some research at the beginning. So I reached out to my network and asked, like, if I'm going to have a talk about high performing teams, what are the things that you want to hear? And actually, I was really surprised. I got tons of answers, and there were so many people asking about things that they want to learn about high-performing teams. As you can see here, there's only a couple of them: conflict management, frameworks, how do we measure success, what's the role of culture in this? And to be honest, I will not be able to answer all of these because we unfortunately only have 30 minutes time today. So you will get a glimpse of how I view high-performing teams and how we can help teams to become high-performing. If there is more details needed, I definitely also recommend a couple of books at the end of that session today. So what you will learn today is what high performance is from my perspective, how to evaluate your team's performance, and then 4 simple steps to improve your team's performance. And there is even a spelling mistake in there. So what is a high performing team? Well, high performing team, there are 2 words in there actually, which is team, right? Like, what is a team? A team is a highly independent group of people, and team members need one another to get work done. I think we all worked in teams that were supposed to be teams, but didn't really collaborate that close with each other. So although they were supposed to be a team, they probably didn't act like a real team. So in order to be a high-performing team, I think working together and helping one another to get work done is one of the crucial parts of a true team. What is high performance? Well, high performance has different angles, right? If I would ask the exec team what high performance is, for sure it is like delivering value to the company, having impact, increasing revenue. if I would talk to teams about what high performance is, it is most likely feeling comfortable, feeling a sense of belonging, being part of something, having actually the ability to contribute to something bigger. And actually what high performance is it is achieving an outstandingly impressive performance by making optimal use of the capabilities of each individual team member. So now my question, and I would appreciate if you can probably just leave a comment in the chat. Are you currently working in a high-performing team, or have you ever worked before in a high-performance team? I would love to see your answers here. And while you're probably leaving your answer in the chat, not currently, but yes, I have in the past. Let me move on with my presentation, because honestly, it's a myth. And if we look at the numbers, here you see like current no, yes, and many people are not working in high performing teams right now. So, and the reason is that actually research shows that 75% of all teams are dysfunctional. So if you're not working in a high performing team right now, that's okay, because most of us aren't. 60% of all teams fail to achieve their goals. Like how horrible is that, right? Like for all of us, working in a team that fails to achieve their goals can also hurt us personally. And then only 10% of the teams are performing on very high standards, at least according to their leaders. Yes, but long ago. One thing to be aware of, just because one team is high performing does not mean that the entire organization is high performing, right? Because it might mean that one team is set up for success for different reasons, and we will talk later about that, but it doesn't necessarily mean that your entire organization is high performing. So you might see teams in your organization as well that are probably performing on another level than you do, and that's okay. So from my perspective, there is a simple equation that if you look at it, it feels simple. If you dive deeper, and we will do so, it is not as simple as it seems. My personal approach to high performance is to look at 4 different categories. It is first and foremost people, followed by purpose, followed by process. If I can make sure that people, purpose, and process are set up in the right way, I can also expect my teams to deliver performance. So what does that mean in detail? Actually, first, as I said, it's all about people. And we should aim to create a workplace that enables people to thrive. How do we do that? It's complex, right? In order to make sure, the view is cut off. Has anyone else these challenges right now?
Yeah, we can see that.
It's cut off?
Yeah, just a little bit. I'm not sure what's, maybe just a rendering challenge in Canva potentially.
Okay. So unfortunately, I can't change that yet.
It's okay. I think you're fine. Yeah.
Okay, got it. Thanks, Scott. So when we're talking about people, some of the things that we need to look after is there psychological safety given, right? Like, do our people feel safe enough in order to raise their opinion? Are they able to provide feedback, and can they share their thoughts? Is there an opportunity for them to work in diverse team? Do we have leadership that cares for people and that helps other people to grow? Do we have career opportunities? Are we paying fair salaries? Do our people understand their roles and responsibilities? And I think especially Melanie's talk before mine also gave some ideas about how can we make sure that people can thrive in a very inclusive environment. So in order to make sure that we do have the right environment for our people, we need to make sure that autonomy is given, that they are satisfied, that teams are diverse, that leadership is in a good shape, that we do have career opportunities, that roles are defined, that their health balance is given, that they can trust each other, and that things are in a good balance. Second point, purpose. Give meaning to your talents' everyday work. I think we all want to contribute to something bigger, and giving purpose to our teams is something that is really, really important. And same here, like purpose is broad and everyone has a different definition of what purpose is actually. From a product team's perspective, things that I see not only when working within companies, but also in my previous coachings for product leaders in companies around the globe is that many people and many product organizations especially struggle to have a very clear product vision in place, or to provide a good strategy, or to work with OKRs or North Star in order to frame the work they are doing. So there's often a huge disconnect between the product team's backlog and the assumed product vision of the exec team or leaders. Closing that gap, giving meaning to the work that our people are doing, helping them to frame things and to understand why they are working on certain things and how they individually contribute to the bigger picture of the company will help them to feel the purpose and to also have a sense for why they are doing things as they do things actually. It's hard and it's really challenging. And I saw many companies struggling with that purpose piece, because creating a vision and creating a strategy is really hard, especially keeping it up to date, backing it up by data, communicating it across the company is an ongoing task that takes lots of time. And that is really a hard challenge for many product leaders. But if I'm not providing purpose to my teams, how can I expect them to work on the right things? I can't. So one thing that I also asked on Twitter is like, do you actually understand your product strategy and can you prioritize your work accordingly? And feel free to again leave a comment in the Zoom chat here while I'm sharing the results of my research on Twitter. And it's surprising and not surprising at the same time. There it is, somewhat, right? Like, how hard is that? Yes, congratulations. There's one participant said yes, so you're one of the few people. And somewhat is the most prominent answer right now, right? But actually, if you do not know your company strategy, if you do not know the purpose, the mission, the vision, and then you do have this like an incredibly big backlog and all of the tasks that are ongoing, how do you want to know what to prioritize? How do you know what to work on? How do you know whether you move the needle or not? It's really important to keep these things like really organized and to help your teams to understand how they contribute and how they can really move the needle as a team. If they can't, they will never ever be able to become a high-performing team. Part number 3, process. I know many people are somewhat allergic against processes, and I understand why. But honestly, a lightweight and well-defined process helps the teams to stop reinventing the wheel. And if we're talking about performance, like what hinders performance, everything where we need to start from scratch and rethink over and over again hinders performance. So in order to make sure that our teams can become high performing, we need to understand that there needs to be a good team structure in place. Things like the role canvas from Melanie's talk previously, or a clear understanding of accountabilities. All of these are things that help us to define better processes and to make sure that people feel ownership, have clarity, have standards, and understand how to make decisions and how to communicate certain decisions, or how to communicate strategy and vision, or how to communicate releases, or how to build products. One of the biggest challenges I see in most of the product teams I'm working with is that they can't even explain me on how they build processes, products. And how do you want to be how do you want to perform if you do not even know how to build a product, right? So if one team builds a product in way A and another team builds it in another way, it's completely confusing for your organization. Some teams might do discovery, other teams might not. Some teams might work with product marketing to plan the release, other teams might not. So there's a lot of confusion if you're not having at least lightweight processes in place, and it supports teams to be inefficient and to not understand how they can really become high performing. So really make sure that your processes are working. Point 4, people are happy, processes are defined, the purpose is given. Well, I think now is the point where we can also expect performance. What is performance? Performance does not only mean that teams deliver results and that revenue is growing, it also means that they feel a sense of value, that the team health is in a very good stage, that employee retention is high, and especially that your employee satisfaction is also very high, right? Like performance has many, many faces, and I don't want us to mix up high-performing teams with revenue only. It has various aspects, and as a leader, we should make sure that we support our teams to deliver a good performance while also feeling fulfilled by their everyday job. Now the question is, but how do we do that? That's a lot. Like, where do I start and where do I end? Here's my approach to it. 3 steps. First, define. 2, assess. 3, prioritize. So let's get started. What do we do? Step number 1, define an end goal. What is an end goal? That's my very personal view on how people, process, purpose, and performance can look like. And I will not go in detail through all of them. But for example, if I would talk about people, how can that look like? We can define people as we are a team that strives to provide value to the user and our business by collaborating cross-functionally and delivering results while staying current with our craft, sharing a growth mindset, and working together to continuously learn and improve. This is nothing that you should do all by yourself. It's a shared thing. You can do that together with other leaders, with your team. You can start by yourself, but having an end goal in mind and having a clear understanding of where do you want to be in a quarter or 2 or 3 or 4, no matter how long you think it takes, helps you to also understand how can I get there. Only if we have a purpose and a vision, we also can lay out the plan in order to get where we want to be. Step 2, assess the status quo. What I usually do, I do have kind of a rough questionnaire, which I use in order to do stakeholder interviews, right? It's completely similar to what we are usually doing when we're doing user research or discovery. I'm talking to stakeholders, trying to understand, what do you think? Where are the challenges actually? How do we measure data? What's the purpose? Do you understand our strategy? What's the vision? How do you feel here? What's the team health? Like all of the areas that I showed you previously, just try to get a real sense of the state of the company and try to not only talk to product people and your team, but also try to understand your stakeholders and outside stakeholders' view in order to come up with a 360-degree evaluation of where your team is today and where they probably need your support in order to get better. Also, there are tons of documentation in every single company. Try to understand that. How do people document decisions today? How are they working with each other? Can you find documentation around the strategy, the vision? Is it easily accessible? What kind of processes are there? Are they documented? Just try to understand the ways of working of their teams, no matter if you're joining a company new or if it's a company that you're working for already for a couple of years. Also, engagement surveys are pure gold because this gives us a good indicator of where your people are right now and where the biggest challenges are. And last but not least, data. There's always data, whether it's churn rate, employee churn rate, company goals or revenue goals or whatever it is. Try to get an understanding of where your company is today. So just assess the entire state of the organization. Step 3, identify your priorities. As we've seen in the previous slides, building high-performing teams is nothing that you do overnight. It is a large task. It will take a couple of months, if not even years, depending on the size of your teams, your organization, as well as the state of your organization. But you got to start somewhere. So if you've made an assessment, you can now start prioritizing it. Use one of the standard prioritization frameworks that you're probably used to. What I like to use is the classical ICE scoring. It works anyways everywhere. Assess the impact of certain steps you can take, measure your confidence, like how certain are you that if you're doing that single task that it is the right choice, and probably also measure the ease of implementing the specific thing. And then just come up with a prioritized list of things that you can do. Try to get as much input and buy-in as possible, and then start executing. Even if you start changing tiny little things, but continuously and over time, you will see that there can be a huge improvement in different areas and also on the state of your team. Step 4, implement and iterate. And please keep it simple, right? Like we often tend to overcomplicate things. I really recommend you, and at least that's my way of working. I do have a simple Kanban board in Notion. It is nothing more than a to-do, doing, done list. I move things from one column to another. I try to limit work in progress. So I'm currently, for example, working on introducing a North Star metric. There are 500 other things I can do right now. They are all in the to-do list, which is fine because I know that this takes time, and I know that I cannot only focus on getting these things done because I also have other duties, but at least I want to see some progress. So Kanban board for me personally works perfect. And that's the end of my presentation today. 2 more slides. First, the key takeaways. High performance is unique. High-performing team in one organization is completely different from another organization. Find your own definition of high performance and align with your teams, and then just start. Make it simple, define an end state, evaluate, improve, and don't underestimate. It's an ongoing effort, and it's really hard to finish it. If you're interested to read more, there are some book recommendations on the last slides. I also highly recommend to dive deeper in Google's project Aristoteles. There's a lot of really amazing information around high-performing teams in there. And that's the end. If you want to connect with me, I'm more active on Twitter than on LinkedIn. Feel free to get in touch with me. Thank you.
That's awesome, Stephanie. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. I want to open it up just for people to ask any questions they may have. We can utilize the Q&A functionality here, and we'll be happy to answer any of those. Maybe I just want to maybe kick things off with one of my own here, and that's you recently moved into this new role that you have, I believe, in the last I think 5-6 months, if I remember correctly, roughly. And how have you brought some of these kind of tactics to life in terms of your transition into that new role?
Yeah, it was exactly I follow my own process, to be honest. I do stakeholder interviews. I mean, we always say as a leader, take 30, 60, 90 days in order to just learn about everything. It's a little bit unrealistic. And I think if you've ever joined a new company, I've seen never anyone waiting 90 days before making an impact. Nevertheless, the first 30 days, I really just scheduled interviews with everybody and their dog. And I was just listening and trying to understand, how do you feel? Where are the biggest challenges? And it is always the same and still always surprising. Patterns emerge quite fast. Usually you identify 3 to 4 key issues that people just repeat over and over again. So you even probably do not need a prioritization framework, because it becomes pretty obvious that there are key topics to work on immediately.
Yeah, key pains that are sort of part of that. And thinking through like your coaching experiences. I mean, you've got a really diverse range of customers and clients that are essentially working with you on that side as coaches. How do these things change maybe where individuals are dealing with these challenges versus maybe teams collectively? And in particular, when an individual spots these kinds of organizational problems, how can they get their rest of their team really on side and backing the fact that a change or this kind of evaluation is kind of needed?
Yeah, that's truly a big challenge, especially the last one, right? If I'm an individual and I spot all of these issues, like what do I do? Yeah. And often there are two tactics that people follow, and both are not successful from my perspective. Tactic number one is complaining a lot, like this is not working. We are not having a vision. We're not having this. Like I hate it, right? Like that's not going to work because it's not action oriented. And number two is like people coming up with plans and plenty of ideas and then not having a plan on how to implement these. So actually, if you're an individual and you want to get things done, I really just recommend to pick one thing, focus on one thing, make sure that you prove success with that single thing you chose, and then move on. Instead of trying to be everywhere and proving everything at the same time, choose one thing, prove that you can be successful, and then move on.
Yeah, and kind of like really demonstrate a bit of success, which gets that flywheel spinning, contributing to your next success moment you can build upon and going from there.
Exactly. The same way like we should build products, right?
Yeah, exactly. One question somebody had here is, what seems to be the single key major roadblock to getting people on board with things?
Yeah, I think it's patience, right? Because especially if you join a company new, yes, people are excited and people will listen to you, or even if you're with the company for quite some time. Just because you come up with an idea doesn't mean that everyone's immediately excited and like fully on board, right? Yeah. So I think it's really resilience and patience. So you need to make sure that you're not just bringing something up in week one and then you're waiting for everyone to really support you and to get things done, but you need to consistently talk about it and like really spend some time in order to massage people and to convince them and to get them on board and to get some traction. I think that's the biggest roadblock because everyone has a full calendar and so many tasks on their agenda. Why should they support another initiative that you brought up? So be patient.
Yeah, definitely. Maybe one last just question, maybe a bit of story from your past is, can you tell me a little bit about maybe where you've gone into these particular tactics or approaches and struggled to kind of, I guess, get traction in a team, and how did you react in that particular situation and get yourself, so you could adopt these tactics and move forward a little bit?
Oh, yes, I've done that. And it was a horrible situation, to be honest. I've made a big mistake. So I came in with all these ideas and all these plans. And like, I really was convinced that this is the right thing. And the patterns emerged and I knew like where to start actually. So I did. And I tried to convince everyone. But I underestimated that the maturity level of the organization I worked for was not yet ready for becoming product-led. Because actually, to be honest, if you want to build high-performing teams in product can only thrive in product-led organizations, right? If you are working in a feature factory and you come up with like autonomy and like that's not working at all. So I probably underestimated the impact of the maturity level of the organization. Yeah. And I was one step too far ahead of that maturity level and probably needed some more training on actually where do we want to be, what's product led, train people. So I wasn't patient enough. So I just failed.
Yeah, no, that's understandable. I think we've all had our failures on that side. So don't feel like you're the only one on that end
yeah,
by any stretch. Yeah. Maybe one last question here from somebody is like, how do you keep high performing teams on pace when key players leave the team?
Yeah, that's a big challenge. First and foremost, honestly, if you do have a good trusting relationship with your teams, usually you should know a couple of months in advance that they are likely to leave. which will help you to also hire right in advance. And if not, having this vision in mind is a very central tool for me. So whenever someone's leaving my team and a new person onboards, this like vision of people, purpose, performance, and process also helps me to A, hire for the right mindset, or B, bring people on board and make them understand how we want to work in my specific company.
Yeah,
I think that's it's always a good way to just share your way of thinking and also invite them to iterate on it together with you.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much, Stephanie. I'm really glad you can make the time for us today and to contribute to this great conference and event. I really appreciate you just being here and sharing what your experience is.
Thanks for having me. It's been a
No
pleasure.
problem. We'll talk soon. I'll take you off here. And we're going to bring on our next person. 2 seconds, which is Adam. There we go. Adam, I think you can share camera now. There he is, the mighty Adam Thomas. For those of you that don't know Adam, I'm going to do a little bit of an intro, but Adam actually spoke at our last mini conference last fall. Really excited to have him back with us today. Adam's the lead product manager at SmartRecruiters, an all-round thinker, creator, and technologist. He's a well-known product leader and speaker. You've probably seen him at lots of things like Mind the Product and other places. He speaks on topics such as product strategy, management, and leadership, and works closely with tech leaders, product developers, and brands to do more and better when it comes to their product decisions. And I'm really excited to have you here again, Adam. Thanks again for getting engaged and getting involved.
I'm really excited to be here today, Scott.
Yeah,
and
right.
Thank you for having me.
No problem. So with that, I'm going to kick over to you and let you get things started.
All right. Let's see. All right. Can we all see the old screen here? We're good to go?
Yeah.
All right. Awesome. Hi, everybody, and welcome to this conversation about strategic custody. Something I really care about because of this, right? If a tree falls in the forest and no one hears it, does it make a sound? I think we know as product people, it does not, right? We know if there is no impact in the work that we do, then it didn't happen. And the way we affect impact with scale is strategy. Strategy is how we affect teams over time. And so there are a few parts to strategy which we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about this idea of if your strategy is alive or dead, which I think is a major factor in how we are able to hold and protect our strategies. And then lastly, we're going to get to strategic custody, the concept of being able to share our strategies and have people bring things back to us to help impact our decision-making, right? That's where strategic custody comes in. We're thinking about custody in the term or in its definition of protection, protective care, or guardianship. And if you pick up nothing else from this talk, let it be this. If your strategy is stuck in Google Drive and it doesn't impact anything, there is no custody and it is dead. You might as well not have written it. And so if there is something that you are working on that hasn't had any impact, take the things in this talk and try it out. Try different things. But the point is to make sure that you are able to impact people to help them make better decisions over time. So let's start with the idea of strategy. The first thing I want to jump into is Richard Rumelt. If you have not read Good Strategy, Bad Strategy, take the time to do so as soon as you can. I basically give this to any PM that works with me or any PM that I coach, because it is that critical to understand what strategy is, how you're going to affect impact. And so there are three things that Richard Rumelt talks about when it comes to good strategy. It's diagnosis. How are we defining are explaining the nature of a challenge. This could look like problems, right? What problems are we going to go tackle? Guiding actions, which essentially means what are we going to do? How are we going to approach these problems? You can think of these as policies that help people think. What are the ways are we going to think about this over that? And then lastly, coherent action. What are the actual steps that we're going to take in order to make our next decision the best decision? And so these are ways you communicate how you're going to get to your ideal state, what your vision is, and how you're going to overcome your problem in order to get there. Because this is the truth about what we do. We're always going to have to deal with strategy, whether we make one or not. Complexity, obstacles, and alignment challenges continue to happen. It's like this clock that we're looking at right now. It continues to tick because time continues to tick. The work we do is in service of something that we call impact. And if we're not impacting those things proactively, then we're going to have everybody reacting to whatever comes their way. Because that's our role as product people. Our role as product people is to create an environment where the team is consistently making better decisions over time. We're not here to code, although we could. We're not here to create designs, though we could. We could create sales scripts. We could create marketing materials or assets. However, that's not what we're here to do. As product people, we need to create the environment that is going to help the teams that we work with make better decisions over time. Because money time is over. This is really impactful right now. Money time is over. What I mean by money time is over, we're feeling a downturn. Right now, we're feeling a downturn in how tech is perceived and how much money is flowing into tech. We went from a period last year where there was record amounts of investment down and up the value chain, whether it was pre-seed startups all the way through to major companies that are about to go public, and then even on the public markets. And now we're at a downturn, right? Just last month alone, we had 15,000 tech people laid off. We're going to have more in the foreseeable future. That is the cost of a lack of impact. And as I mentioned before, impact affects strategy, right? How we show up is based on how much impact we have as product people. We do not code, we do not have designs, we do not have sales scripts. How we impact all of those things through our strategy is really the value add we give to an organization. And so now that we've discussed what strategy is, let's talk about if it's dead or alive. And so my favorite quote, one of my favorite quotes is from Mike Tyson, right? Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. The reason why I am showing this is we're not making plans. Plans is actually antithetical to what we're doing because everybody's gonna get punched in the mouth. Another way of saying this is Dwight Eisenhower saying, no plan survives contact with the enemy. We're not going to create plans that stick. The idea of making a plan is just to serve the strategy. It's to help us get some bearings and then to iterate and move on. That's what the Agile Manifesto is about, particularly the fourth tenet, which is responding to change over following a plan. That's what we're here to do. But unfortunately, most of the strategy that we have out here is passive, right? It takes that first punch and then it goes away. Or it doesn't even bother to take that first punch at all. And so let me know if this sounds familiar. When you're talking to somebody, there's an inability for people to say why you're doing it. Let's say you go poll 3 random people, an engineer, a designer, and a marketer, and ask them why. What's the big problem we're trying to solve? If you can't get the same answer from each person, right, your strategy is passive because it's not really guiding them. You're not diagnosing the problem in a way that they understand. You have releases with no rhyme or reason over time. What you work for in March has no bearing on what you're working on in December. That tells me you don't have a guiding policy. Nothing is shaping what you're working on. So whatever strategy that you have or say you have is not the strategy that's in place. It's a very reactive, passive strategy. And if there's a lack of measuring consistency, right? If somebody can't tell you what the success look like, that's telling me that although you may have next actions, they're not really hitting the mark. They're not really landing the way that they should. And so that's where you have to talk about the difference between an alive strategy and a dead strategy, right? Alive is active, changing, iterative. We're moving forward versus a dead strategy, which is passive and reactive, right? Remember, the key to this is strategy always exists. It's up to you as a product person to decide whether you're having an alive strategy, one that moves the needle, versus a dead strategy, one that's passive and reactive. Right. And so here's 6 tenets of an alive strategy, right? When it comes to course correction, alive strategy iterates. Dead strategy always starts from scratch. You have to move with what's going on in your culture, in your context. With change, alive strategy anticipates risk. Dead strategy hides them, right? We're very clear about what may create roadmaps and bumps in our roadmap, bumps in the road. We have to be very clear about that. We're very understanding of the value chain. Alive strategy engages with the ecosystem in which it exists. Dead strategy engages with a point in time. This looks like, hey, going out and having coffee with folks and understanding what's driving sales, what's driving marketing, what's driving our support teams. If not, you're just engaging with a roadmap. And that's where feature roadmaps have a problem, right? They're really focused on this idea, this point in time. Around determination, alive strategy makes bets. Dead strategy knows the future. One of the biggest things that a really good strategy does is it allows people to understand the ambiguity of what you're chasing after. There is a lot that could happen with your strategy. However, a lot of us, especially with passive strategy, say, this is the future, this is where we're going. And we have that faux certainty. Much better to make bets and give yourself room to change, give yourself room to grow. Customer needs. Alive strategy evolves with the customer. Dead strategy is static. Again, dead strategy always tells you what the future is. It's not changing. We made a plan in October, so we're going to follow it in December. Your customers may change. And so you need to evolve with it. And then purpose. Your alive strategy is very clear. It's repeatable. People understand it. Dead strategy is muddled, right? You don't know where you're going or why you're doing it. You just have a thing, right? And so when you have an alive strategy, it feels very clear. It's the sign you've been looking for. You know you're working because it affects how you think and what you do. You're driving impact, which is very different than a dead strategy, which lives in Google Drive. No one looks at it. We just kind of have it existing, right? And it doesn't really drive the impact that we're looking to make. And so let's talk about strategic custody, because let's say you have a strategy. Let's say you have it alive. You're thinking about these things. You have these 6 tenets locked in your head. What happens after you build it? Well, if you're not careful, an alive strategy floats into being a dead strategy rather quickly. If you are not sustaining that strategy, if you are not protecting that strategy, right? If a tree falls in the forest, no matter how big and how strong that tree is, if it doesn't make a sound, there is no impact. And so making the strategy isn't enough. You have to have strategic custody. And that custody is defined by the dictionary as protective care or guardianship over someone or something. Our strategy starves without having clear custody. And a starving strategy, as I mentioned before, soon becomes a dead strategy. And so there are a lot of ways to maintain strategic custody. I think it has these main 3 actions that you need to commit to in order to maintain that custody and keep that alive strategy strong. Protect to create custody for that alive strategy. First is repetition. How do we make sure teams carry the problem with them, right? You'll know this is an issue, again, when you ask why, and people don't know why you're doing anything. That means you probably haven't repeated the problem enough. Next is accountability. How do we make sure that teams are actually saying the same story? How are you connecting, right? If you're building things and selling things and marketing things, and they all seem different, and not just across the teams, but across time, there's probably no accountability structure for each team that's building something or within the team itself. And so how do you build that accountability? What are some ways you can do that? And then you have to have clear measurement, right? You got to track what's going on. You have to track the value of these next actions, because if you don't, those next actions mean nothing, right? And that's how you lose trust almost immediately. If the next thing does not help me get to my goal as person X, whether that's an engineer, whether that's a designer, whether that's a salesperson, whoever it is, then I don't need to listen to your strategy. I gotta go make money, right? And so it's important that you're very clear about those next actions. And so one of the things about repetition that I love is something from marketing, right? There's something called the rule of 7. In short, you repeat that something 7 times to a prospect, and they're able to recall it just because of that repetition. If you find your team unable to say why you're doing something, the first question I would ask you as a PM is, how often are you telling them? We may get annoyed with ad reads, but I guarantee you that you'll remember it by the sheer amount of repetition they get in that 30 seconds, right? We all know athletic greens, for example, right? Because you keep hearing it in your podcast over and over and over again. And that's how you have to be as a PM. You have to be ready to repeat, repeat, repeat. Remember, there's a problem that needs to be solved. And so as you keep that problem up in the air, and as you reference your strategy around that problem, you're starting to build that custody around it, because people are starting to see how it can help you solve problems. So ask yourself, have you followed the rule of 7? Have you asked about the problem that you're trying to solve enough? Have you talked about it enough? You'll know it's working when there's an inability to say why you're doing something that goes away, right? And then that gets turned into teammates that are able to turn around and tell you the diagnosis as they're working on stuff. So if your team is working on a particular project, if an engineer is coding, before you say anything, if they say, well, I'm solving this because I am doing this in service of this problem or this diagnosis, without you saying anything, that's when you've done it enough. Teams should be able to repeat stuff back to you. Next, guiding policy that builds accountability. So one of my favorite quotes is from Ron Kohavi, who was working at Microsoft, Airbnb, and Amazon. He ran their innovation spaces. And the thing that he often speaks about is the failure rate for ideas. Ideas have a 60 to 90% failure rate. And I define failure rate as bringing neutral to negative value. That means most of the ideas that we use aren't going to work. And that goes across everyone. That's product, engineering, marketing. The more we talk about these ideas, the more we bring space to these ideas, the more we connect that to our strategy and have something to anchor off of it, the better we are, right? We don't want to become the holder of ideas either. The team is making things, right? They're thinking about things. They have contact in spaces that you don't have contact. And so it's important not only to build that guiding policy in a way that's alive, but to also bring in a level of accountability, bring folks together, talk about what's going on. And so one of my favorite ways of establishing that credibility and that accountability is to sit with stakeholders and having regular touch points. The tool I like to use in particular is a tool called Lean Coffee. Why Lean Coffee? Well, it brings up whatever is important in front of the stakeholders, and you all talk about it together. You vote on what's important. So the important thing surfaces, you have a guiding policy. You can now reference that guiding policy against the problems that are in front of you. And so that builds accountability. The other thing that builds is it gets you as a product person outside of the idea person, which is the worst place for a product person to be, because when you're the idea person, when things work, everybody takes credit. When they fail, everybody blames you. And we have enough stress in our lives anyway. So it's important to distribute that amongst the team, help bring them in to your diagnosis, your problem, and your guiding policy, and then actually start to talk about problems in that way, because it's going to help. And so how do you know it works? Have you established a regular touch point with your stakeholders? And so when you do that, you'll start to notice releases start to have a little bit go from a little rhyme or reason to something that makes sense, right? There's a coherent story that starts to be formed. People start talking about the same things, right? And so that's the accountability. People know how to ask the right questions to the people around them. That's accountability, right? And a lean coffee facilitates a place to do that. And lastly, you want to drive coherent actions with measurements that drive adjustment. And this is where something like OKRs comes into play, especially how Christina Watke talks about them. If you haven't read Radical Focus, please do. It is a fantastic book that talks about how you can leverage OKRs, not in the way that most companies are using them, but as a way to measure coherent action. And so one of the failures I see with teams when it comes to OKRs is they just become meaningful metrics that are on the board. Everybody puts them up at the beginning of the quarter or the beginning of the year, and then they reference them, I don't know, once before it's time to say if you've done it or not, right? And that's not really driving any coherent action. It's not really getting involved in what's in front of you, right? And if an OKR or anything we do, let's be clear, anything that product does, anything that does not drive impact and help teams make better decisions, it's wasted effort. And so one of the things I love about Christina Watke's version of OKRs is it adds in a learning retrospective to the mix, right? What are we learning? How are we doing? It adds health checks to the mix. How healthy are we in terms of understanding this goal, right? How do we match this with our coherent action? And so, right, the key insight isn't the goal, right? Back to dead strategy. Dead strategy talks about a point in time. That's not what we're looking for. We're looking to learn because that's going to get us our global maxima. That's going to help us adjust to what the market is doing. So ask yourself, when's the last time you've adjusted your plan? Remember what we just talked about. 60 to 90% of your ideas are bringing neutral to negative value. Even if you cut that in half, you're in trouble because there's so much that you're missing that's not bringing value, that's adding complexity, right? And if you're not learning, if you're not coming together and learning together, then you're not going to be able to have any discernment around what's bringing neutral value, what's bringing negative value, and ultimately what you're looking for, which is what's bringing positive impact. And so you'll know it's working when people can start to tell you what they're learning, what they're figuring out, right? Your next action, people start questioning, is this going to drive what we're looking for? Is this going to drive the results that we're looking for? And so it's super important that you get those OKRs and proper OKRs, if you're going to use that tool, into the spaces, thinking with learning retrospectives and health checks. And so, again, as we close this talk, strategy means nothing, absolutely nothing if no one uses it. Our job as product managers is to help make teams make better decisions over time consistently. If we're not driving that, then we're not really bringing value to the organization. Now we're just order takers and we're checking off boxes. And in this time where we're looking to create impact, in this time where we're looking to avoid bad outcomes, in this time when we're dealing with a downturn market, how you strategize and how you adjust is becoming more and more and more important. The free money time is gone. So as we close here, think about strategy custody, think about how you're going to tell your story, and think about how you're going to keep that strategy alive so you make impact in everything you do. Thank you.
Awesome job. As always, Adam, really great. Really appreciate it. We're going to jump over to some Q&A, leave a few things open here on this side. And I'll start maybe with the first question that came in. And that's, how do you come up with a product strategy as a new member to a product team? Where do you start?
So I think if you're a new member to the product team, first start with the people around you, right? Like what are they thinking about? What has been successful? What hasn't been successful? If you're in a place with a hierarchy, right? That's when you go to your product leader and say, hey, I'm thinking about a product strategy. What worked? What didn't work last time, right? And taking some time to think about that. What will also come out of that conversation are people to talk to, right? You're going to start your investigative path of creating that product strategy. And so once you get to that point, right, it's just about thinking about your diagnosis, your guiding actions, right? Your coherent actions, right? Your guiding policy and coherent actions from there.
Yeah, I really like back to that core piece you elemented on, is like the diagnosis being the challenge, the guiding actions being the approach, and the coherent action being the steps. We need to start with the challenge really to set a strategy in motion.
I was telling a PM today on my team, right? Like the figuring out the diagnosis is really 90% of the work, right? Yeah. It's like, everything else is kind of useless, right? Who cares if you're beta something or you have some solution to something else, right? It's useless to have a baseball bat on a basketball court.
Yeah, great point. Is there a meeting structure, cross-functional or in the company, that you find helps kind of leverage and helps you vocalize that strategy externally or internally? Sorry.
So what I like to do with this is start small first, right? And just get people active. So literally leveraging breakout rooms with Zoom and just having people address the strategy in that time in these small pockets, right? Let them become missionaries for your work, for your strategy, and then let them counter and ask questions for the strategy that, might make no sense to them, right? Because you're feeding yourself information, you're getting to understand it, and two, you're finding bumps in the road, right? You're finding the pockets where it may not make sense, and so voila.
Good. Yeah, and there's one other question here. What type of documents do you feel are best used to capture and share a product strategy?
I have no idea. That's something you should ask your stakeholders, right? Like, honestly, like this is another thing that something I've really gotten passionate over the last year and a half, 2 years, as I've been writing and thinking a lot about product and product strategy, is we don't have the answers. We're not the answer people. You know who's going to be able to tell you how to talk to them? The person you're talking to, right? And so that's got to be a part of the conversations that you're having with not just your team, but your stakeholders, but with everyone you come in contact with, right? How can I talk to you? It has to be a continuing part of the conversation. And so what you do when you learn those things is you start to build your toolbox on how to reach the right people at the right time, right? In order to create the messaging that you need.
Yeah. I wonder if maybe what it is in some of this is we all want to have it perfect. And instead, back to maybe what you were talking about earlier, the importance here of course correction and taking bets and like little small incremental steps towards that is actually okay. Yes.
In fact, I would say like little mess ups and things are actually a good sign, right? It starts to craft some anti-fragility within your strategy. For those who don't know what anti-fragility is, right? It's a concept from Nassim Taleb, who I recommend everyone read. Fantastic on risk, right? And anti-fragility is a way you can survive, particular small pain points, and actually use them to get stronger, right? And I think that's where product needs to go, right? It needs to be anti-fragile, especially your strategy. So you need to expose it to people so they can tell you this is wrong, that is wrong, this is wrong, that is wrong, because then you're very clear.
That's awesome. Thank you, Adam. Really, really great. Really, really appreciate it. I mean, I want to acknowledge too the the fantastic photo you got behind you of Frederick Douglass, in particular, because he himself was actually someone who was very good at bridging and making alliances and bridging divides with people. And so I think a lot of things here about strategy are really, embedded in essentially characters and people of that type.
100%. Oh, before we go, everybody take your phone out and give me some feedback. Please, 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 please. Anybody that asks a question through that form, I will get back to you this weekend. For the people in the future, it'll work. The form is not going down. So please, 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 feedback. Let me know how I can make this better. And yeah, that's one of the reasons why I have Frederick Douglass up here, right? You nailed it. Somebody that's able to get different people. He was somebody that get different people together. And yeah, like talk and bridge gaps and create progress.
Yeah, wonderful. Awesome. Thank you, Adam. Once again, really, really appreciate it. Really great chat and session. I'll take you off stage and we'll bring on our last speaker, which is Emily Batterson. Thanks again. Emily, just 2 seconds and I'll get you on here. Should be able to share camera and screen.
There we go.
There comes Emily. Fantastic.
Hello, everybody.
I'll just start off with a little introduction for Emily. For those that don't know her, Emily's a product professional with over 10 years experience, currently the Director of Product Management at Fortress Information Security. She's built SaaS products in healthcare, immigration, health insurance, cybersecurity, and specializes in 0 to 1 product builds and launches. She also recently launched In the Lab, a PM incubator program. I don't know where you find the time, honestly, Emily, but really appreciate you fitting us in and sharing your knowledge and experiences today on this great topic. So with that, I'm going to pass over to you and let's get things started.
All right. Thank you so much, Scott. So pleased to be here, and thanks everybody for sticking around for the last talk of the day. Appreciate it. I will kind of do a quick introduction. My topic today is going to be talking about how to purposefully build a diverse product team. It's something that I have been really digging into this calendar year, so since the beginning of 2022. Been obviously as an underrepresented person in technology, it's always been something relatively near and dear to my heart. So I'm really excited to share this with you. This is my bio, which Scott already gave everybody, so I will not go through it. But I have a lot of recent experience kind of chatting with folks and doing a lot of conversations around how people build their product teams, right? Especially when it comes to like early career folks or entry-level folks. And that was for my In the Lab that I just launched a couple of months ago. So this is top of mind for me. Here we go, launching into it. All right, so diversity is, in my opinion, becoming a little bit of a buzzword, even though it is very core to teams, especially healthy teams, especially robust teams, and teams that are making good quality decisions and good quality products, right? So in the summer of 2020, almost every single tech company, at least that I saw, worth the press, right, came out with a diversity and inclusion statement and commitment. Everyone was making a lot of really great noises with their mouths and typey things about how important diversity and inclusion is to those companies and to like people in general, right? And it was great. And yet, here we are. It's actually not getting any better. And in fact, for some folks, it is sort of getting worse. This is something that really shocked me. This was a report that came out just a couple of months ago, and it encompasses, right, the period after that summer of 2020 when we all made our diversity and inclusion commitments, which reported that Black talent in technical roles increased 0.6% since 2018. That is miserably low because the numbers are pretty low to begin with. So the improvement there is very, very small. So not great. We're going to talk about it though. Let's see how some other companies are doing, especially companies that you know, right, and have a reputation for being diverse and inclusive places to work, like Slack, right? So Slack, words on the left, stats on the right here. I'm focusing mostly on technical roles here. So women, 34% in their technical roles. Let's see, I've got race and ethnicity for Slack as well. This is for 2020. You can see the numbers here. We've got single digits for everyone who is not Asian or white. Not great. Apple's another company that does a lot of talking around diversity and inclusion. This is just tech numbers. Again, they've got like retail stores and a bunch of other ways to break these numbers out. I chose tech because we're technologists, right? That's what their talk is about. Again, so you can see the gender, less than 25%, not great. Race and ethnicity, very similar to Slack, actually, right? We've got single digit numbers for Black technologists and Hispanic and Latinx technologists. And in case you thought Pinterest was any better, because they have a really great, robust APM program, right? And they do a lot of really good work. They put out really good reports. This came from a very plush, well thought out report. We are still not doing well here at Pinterest. So you can see again, breakout by gender on the right. And I highlighted both tech and engineering, because I'm not quite sure exactly how they split it up. Either way, very, very similar numbers, right? We're kind of noticing a trend, and it's certainly not equitable, certainly not equal numbers of all of our different races, ethnicities, and genders. So when you think about your product team, what does it look like? Just take a moment to think about the folks who are on your product team, who are leading your product team. What do they look like? How do they act? Where are they from? What college did they go to? It's really hard to hire product managers. So my working theory on this is because it is so hard to hire product managers and product people in general. Hiring managers tend to find these signals, and they tend to use those as ways to decide who is going to be a successful product manager and a not successful product manager, right? And unfortunately, a lot of these signals add to our diversity and inclusion issues where we're not being diverse and inclusive, right? A lot of these signals are education institutions. I'm only going to hire people who went to Stanford and have a CS degree, right? Previous employers, I know a lot of startups who only hire ex-FANG employees. That's absolutely a thing that people use, right? Oh, he worked at Google, he must be pretty good, let's hire him, right? Product managers who get referred by current employees or board members or advisors or things like that. And then product managers who have a lot of experience, people like me who've just been doing this for a super long time. And hiring managers can kind of assume if they've been successful in the past, likely they're going to be successful in the future. Unfortunately, what this ends up doing is it creates a lot of homogeneity in your product teams, right? If everyone went to Stanford and has a CS degree, they're all going to share similar characteristics, whether it's race and ethnicity or just like how they think and how they approach problems and those sorts of things, right? Creates a lot of standardization, but not in a good way as far as your product team members go. And the last thing I want to say here is that it is so easy to hire people who look like you. It's called a subconscious bias. We all have it. Every human has it. And it is the likelihood that you are going to trust people who look and sound and act like you versus people who do not. That is a really hard one that everyone individually has to find a way to overcome and be thoughtful about. And it is a real thing. And I will publish the slides after this. I've got sources and stuff. So if anyone thinks I'm just pulling this out of the air, I'm not. I actually did a decent amount of research for this talk. Okay, so let's fix it. So I'm going to preface this next portion by telling you that I identify as a woman and I check the Hispanic, Latinx, whatever the term is right now, because my family is Mexican, on the census forms, right? So that is my background. I've been in technology for 14, 15 years at this point. I've seen a lot of things. I've personally experienced a lot of things. That is how I am coming to this topic. My personal biases and preferences will absolutely be represented here, just like anybody would be, right? And obviously, this is a very kind of not delicate topic, but it is awkward for some people. So if you have feelings, like that's okay. Feel your feelings, totally fine. Okay, that's the caveat. Let's go. Where do we start if we want to fix our product teams? Because we've realized that everybody looks the same or acts the same or talks the same or went to the same school. Okay, start with how you hire. That is the first thing you can do, and it's honestly the easiest thing you can do. Talk to other product folks, other product leaders, how they hire. What do they do to like expand their pool? What do they do if they're not getting a good bunch of candidates that are coming in, right? Like talk to your peers at other places and kind of get tips and tricks and trade information, just like you would about how you present roadmaps or strategy like Adam just talked to us about, right? Like this is just another topic that product people need to collaborate on. So ask a buddy, ask a friend, ask your mentor, ask your mentees, whatever, and kind of do some homework on it. Consider if your role actually requires an advanced degree. I've seen a lot of product roles that are mid-level and require MBAs, right? Or Masters of Science in Computer Science. I don't agree. I don't think so, right? And that's just another way that we start limiting people coming in the door. We start putting up those barriers to humans who don't have advantages or time or money or whatever to go get those advanced degrees. So, maybe think about that. Consider hiring product managers who are early career or career changes. I am working with career changers right now for my In the Lab program, and I can personally guarantee that if you have a career changer on your hands, that person is probably going to hustle and work really hard and ask really good questions because they've already demonstrated a predisposition, right, to get out of their comfort zone. That's a really good sign for product management. Those people are honestly like total opportunities waiting for people to scope them up. Don't ignore them. And I've got more on that towards the end. And then finally, considering hiring for potential over past track record, right? So, if I'm in the room and I've got 15 years of product experience or whatever, and someone else is in the room and they've only got 2 years of product experience, like it's possible I've seen more stuff, but like, let's look at characteristics of a human and see, maybe that person with only 2 years of experience actually is going to be able to like land and have some really great thoughts and content and things like that. I was recently skimming through Petra Billy's book. It's called Strong Product People. It is extremely good. It is for product leadership and product leaders in general, but I think it's great for all sorts of people because we all do mentoring and conversations and we all help each other, right? So very applicable for all of us. She identified 5 characteristics of good PMs that really resonated with me, and they have nothing to do with product management, right? It's curiosity, emotional intelligence, the desire to make an impact on life, on things, on anything, right? Intellectual horsepower, adaptability, and nice to spend time with, right? Just like a pleasant human that you like chatting with. These are great ways that great things that you can gauge in an interview process that have nothing to do with degrees or past success. And I agree with Petra 100% here that if you have someone with those things and you give them the tools that they need to be good at their job, I think that person will go far, right? I've got some confidence around that. All right, recruiting. There's no pipeline problem. There are tons of product managers out there who would love your job. If you are finding, I've got a note down here, if your job is only attracting white men and you're noticing that in interviews and phone screens and that sort of thing, please try to do something about it. Please don't just say, well, I can't do anything. I only have these candidates, right? So here are some suggestions. Recruit from underrepresented backgrounds on purpose. Go out to these job boards. I've listed a bunch here that I personally like, and I follow their newsletters, and I like dip in and check on what they're doing and that sort of stuff. So I'm vouching for them as a human, as a professional. Diversify Tech, Black Product Managers, Tech Korea, Fravis. Fravis is great. They focus on Black women technologists, run by a great woman who I follow on Twitter. They cost some money, right? And there are some like forms to fill out about, how you treat your employees, because nobody wants to send somebody into a toxic environment. That makes total sense, right? But I promise you, it will be worth it. You will get some good candidates because I personally know some folks in this group, right? And they are great. The other idea is to reach out to folks that you know from underrepresented backgrounds on Twitter or LinkedIn, right? So if you DM me and be like, hey, Emily, I'm recruiting for a product manager role. I will send you candidates and they will probably be women, almost all of them, right? And that is a great thing. Most of us in the underrepresented category are happy to make those introductions for our friends and our colleagues. Obviously, if they don't want to, like, hey, no problem, you tried, right? But that is a great source. And like, that's another way that you can use your network. If you've only ever worked with one woman on your product team, right? Like, yeah, ask her, right? She shouldn't be doing your recruiting for you, but I bet she's got a network. And then finally, I would recommend you look at your job description and make changes. If you find you're only drawing in candidates who are white men, there's a bunch of studies, there's a raft of studies, we all know them, about men specifically applying to stuff even if they're not fully qualified, and women not applying to stuff if they're not fully qualified. right? So there's some self-limitation between the genders, and I would argue also in ethnicities, right? If you have someone who's just new to tech, isn't sure, isn't confident, anyone in that position is probably going to be under-leveling themselves. So, think holistically about what you actually need. Do you need undergraduate or graduate degrees? I know some incredibly smart people who went into the military after high school and don't have their graduate degree, or they don't have their undergraduate degree. They're pretty smart and they're doing really well for themselves in their career. They just don't have it, right? Are you really gonna force those folks out? It's a big missed opportunity. Same thing for industry and domain expertise. As someone with a bunch of domain expertise, I will tell you, most really smart self-starters can get themselves onboarded in a couple of months. And it might take a little extra effort, but it's going to be okay. And I think doing that investment upfront, you will benefit greatly in the long run. You and your team will benefit greatly in the long run. Okay. How can you support new product talent? So you bring in new product talent, they're from underrepresented backgrounds, maybe. Now you have to support them, right? And this is where I get a lot of pushback. And this is where I heard a lot of resistance while I was doing my in the lab conversations. A lot of people are not super able, I guess I'll say that, not super able to offer up as much time as they feel like those early product managers need, right? Because everyone needs mentoring and training and those sorts of things. There's a ton of informal and formal mentoring out there right now. Nicole Daines, who talked yesterday in this mini conference, has a whole mentoring matching service. A lot of product people are willing to mentor in their free time. I do this a ton, right? In their free time on the weekends, right? They volunteer to do this stuff to see other people be successful and happy and all that sort of things. There's a lot of opportunities out there to match people. It doesn't necessarily have to be with you as the hiring manager or someone who's bringing on that underrepresented talent. There's other folks out there, right? So obviously it will take time and an investment of your time, and I'm not saying it won't, but there's also other ways that you can get those folks the support they need. Okay, so you've built a team. Training. Let's talk about training really quickly, because this is also super important. I've seen a lot of product teams just hire product managers and expect they're going to have just someone working at a product manager level for years and years and years. Don't give them training, don't give them career ladder, don't give them opportunities, and those people leave, right? And now you're losing talent, you're losing historical knowledge of your business and your products and how you built them. Not a good outcome. You want these people to stick around. 97% of tech employees said that training programs was an important factor when deciding where to work. It is, at this point, table stakes. Big tech companies, I found a lot of references to tuition reimbursement, $10,000 to $12,000 a year. That's a ton of money, right? If you're a small startup and you've got a small product team, what I've done in the past for my product teams is just offer $1,000 of reimbursable funds as a line item in the budget. And then people can go out and find the training that they like. I just tweeted something yesterday, but there are so many product trainings up and running right now, so many starting, so many running right now. Maven has a bunch. There's a bunch of independent trainings out there. And just every flavor and idea that you could possibly have is out there for you to look at. So absolutely try to ask your HR and finance folks. You will want to work with your HR and finance folks on this one. It is important. I literally just got a little line item that said, product team learning and development. And it was $8,000 because there were 8 folks on the team, right? And it was enough. And we sent some people to align the product training, and it was great. And it really helped us as a team. And also it helped that individual really grow their career. Please try to do this one if you can. Call in your HR folks. If you can't get it for 2022, try for 2023, right? Okay. Next up. Keeping your product team equitable. This is something I have personally seen quite a bit, which is your product team salaries vary way too widely, and you get people with the same title at completely different salary levels. This feels really bad for everybody, to be honest with you, but especially for underrepresented people who all of a sudden find oh my gosh, my coworker, I'm the only woman on this team and I'm getting paid so much less. What the heck? How did that happen, right? Feels awful. That's a personal experience. I've seen it experience. That is a thing, and it doesn't feel good. So please if you're a product leader, This is absolutely your responsibility, and you need to keep an eye on it because it can drift very quickly. If somebody comes in and negotiates really hard and you really want that candidate, right, you're going to wind up with a lot of drift. All of your product managers should also be represented on the ladder. I've seen product teams where one person just has a weird title, like product manager, data analyst. What does that person do? Are they product manager? Are they data analyst? What is their thing, right? Try, if you can, if at all possible, try to get your titles closer aligned to a standardized ladder. It makes that person's life easier because they've got like more transferable resumes. And it's just going to make people happier and understand where they are in the process. No one likes to feel like they're on a weird tangent of a career, right? Floating off in the ether. Not great. And then if you do this little audit and you find some of your product managers are outside their salary bands, please correct it as soon as you can. If it, again, just like the training, if you can't get it for 2022, please for 2023, make sure you think about your pot of allocation for your cost of living increases and your salary increases, and try really hard to get that equitably distributed. I have done this personally before where somebody was just brought in at a very high level and then continued to be at that high level. And we ended up adjusting through cost of living increases. We gave somebody a 6% raise and somebody else a 3% raise, just so that we could get them a little bit closer in compensation, because they were doing literally the exact same job, which is bad. Bad to have that much drift within one job title. Okay. Next up, yes, salary bands. This is important. But you know what? If you provide your salary bands, this is actually great. And I've seen it and I've used it and it has totally worked great for me. It provides a lot of visibility across the board. It increases trust. It allows your current hires to know what salary new people are coming in on, so they can kind of be aware. If I'm an APM and I see that we have a product manager role listed and there's a salary band down there, I understand and I know, like, oh, when I get their role, I can also have that much money, right? It is helpful. It also decreases the ask gap, which I wasn't super aware was a thing until recently. The tech platform Hired actually did the study. Women tend to ask for 3% less money than men do, just across the board. When they're negotiating, they just ask for less. Salary bands will help fix that, right? Because everyone knows what the range is and you can just negotiate in the range. It also makes your compensation expectation conversations significantly easier on the front end of your hiring process, because you don't have to play that weird game of you show your cards first and I'll show you, right? You don't have to do that. Just tell people what the bottom of the salary band is, and either they will take the job and it works for them, or they won't take the job and it won't work for them, right? And it makes things a lot easier. And just a final note here, which is that states like New York and Colorado already require you to be doing this on your job listings. Get ahead of it. It's going to spread more and more to different companies. I just highly recommend that people start thinking about this and talking about this, because I think it's going to become very standard in the upcoming months and years ahead of us. All right, here's some examples of career ladders and salary bands. Your mileage may vary. Very timely, Lenny Lenny-san, recently published a great blog on this topic. I linked it right here, and it has a bunch of examples of big tech companies. All of the numbers that I kind of ballparked on here are non-FANG and don't include equity or anything like that. It's just cash compensation. And if you want to use this for a starting point, please feel free. Please do that. It's roughly right, roughly on track, I would say. But obviously, again, your mileage may vary. If you're hiring a Google product manager, that number is probably going to be higher, right? All right, supporting your whole team. I know we're getting close to the end here, so I'll kind of button this up really quickly. It really feels terrible being the only person like you on a team. Just be very blunt about it. Doesn't feel good. It's isolating and lonely. I'm routinely the only woman on my stand-ups, on my team meetings, on my engineering team meetings, on my leadership meetings. Doesn't feel great. So this is why ERGs are so helpful. I know ERGs can be kind of controversial, right? Only talk about work stuff. But it is actually really helpful to have a moment with other people, other women, for me specifically, right? To kind of talk about problems you're facing and situations you're facing and all that sort of stuff. So it is actually pretty helpful to have those ERGs to help support. Sometimes you should go around and look at your product teams and each development team, scrum team, squad, whatever you call them, and see, if there's one a Black technologist on a team, right? Maybe chat with that person, make sure they're okay, see if they, if we should maybe rearrange it. So maybe they're not the only person like them on their team, that sort of thing. Just be thoughtful about it, especially if you're from a majority. It definitely is it can be an awkward conversation, but I have found if you come into it with an open heart and open mind, and just, say that you're trying to help, you'll probably be okay. And then finally, please make sure you don't leave anybody behind on the career ladder. Make sure everyone's climbing together. That's really important too. All right, last thing I'm going to mention, this is a shameless plug. If you've been listening to this whatever we're down to now, 66 folks, and you're like, oh, wow, yeah, my team, I could use a little bit more. Yes, we are only a bunch of white dudes. That is, ooh, yeah, okay, we should do something. Hey, I have some great news, which is that I have started a great cohort with career changers trying to get into product management from underrepresented backgrounds. It's called In the Lab. A few of our folks already have new jobs, already have jobs lined up, but I am very willing to make some introductions and have a conversation with anybody. We've got another cohort starting in autumn of this year, and I think it's a great program. I'm biased. But everyone I've been chatting with thinks it's pretty cool too, so that's nice. You can get more information from it in thelab.com or email me at this address, and I'm the only person behind this email address, so it'll come to me. Hi. But feel free to drop me a line if you know anybody trying to get in product. Feel free to flip this over to them. We're going to start doing interviews for the new cohort coming up in probably August. So, all right, that is my deck. Tough conversation. Thanks all the 60 some odd people for hanging with me here. I plugged the product makers community for Scott. I know that was that was the preference there, but here's my links for Twitter and LinkedIn as well. So if you want to yell at me there, feel free. I'm around.
Yeah, thank you, Emily. I honestly, I don't let the head count here reflect the impact of this talk either. There'll be a lot of people who end up watching this afterwards and gaining the insights that you shared from that. Really fantastic. I think the important part here, just to echo maybe broadly the themes you talked about here, is diverse teams really build diverse products, and we need to make sure that we open space, and it's our jobs as product leaders to create that space and that success essentially as part of this. I want to jump maybe in a few of the questions that we've got if in the time that we've got left. Kevin had a question here, a little bit around the trend line around DEI across these different organizations. I know you shared some particular stats there, but have you seen anything that's different maybe in the trend versus the current numbers?
No, it's flat. The lines are flat. It's so depressing. I kept trying to refresh and find updated data because I had so much trouble grokking the flat lines, and all of these programs, it just doesn't seem to make a difference. And I don't know why. To be totally honest, the only thing I can think of is that people are not just they're not giving people the opportunities. That's the only conclusion I came up with, and I hate that conclusion, and I really hope I'm wrong. But yeah, no, it is basically flat. Like I said, that report just came out about Black technologists, 0.6% increase is nothing, right?
Yeah, statistically insignificant, essentially.
Exactly, it really is. So unfortunately, we have really been leveled off, and even the number of folks in CS programs is starting to level off. Mm-hmm. It's pretty disheartening.
Yeah, definitely agree. Another question here was, what role do you see fully remote work having in promoting team diversity? Is it all pros, or do you see aspects of this maybe being detrimental to certain groups as well?
I think remote roles are so advantageous to underrepresented folks in tech, especially career changers who are women, who tend to be a little bit older and tend to be moms, right? Like me. It is just the flexibility is so great, and you don't feel, if you've never been in Only, it's hard to describe this, but when you walk into an office and nobody looks like you, it is very distressing. You get this little panic in the back of your head, am I in the correct place right now? And I think remote role really cuts that down, because you're not walking into a place that kind of feels like maybe it's not for you. It's a lot easier to just hop on a Zoom, and maybe not everyone has their cameras on, right? It's a lot easier to kind of feel like I'm not different. I'm not so overwhelmingly different. So I really love remote work for underrepresented folks. I think it works better for underrepresented folks. And I think culturally speaking, it is really, really great. It's also a lot easier to find your crew, right? Without having like your designated ERG meeting time.
Yeah.
You know, you can kind of like more off time. You can kind of chat with folks who are fit in whatever demographic you happen to fit in.
Yeah, that's great. That's really great. Yeah, and I think the really intentionality piece of this event that we put together over this last 3 days here has been bringing a diverse set of perspectives in here. So I really do appreciate you and other people as well, and be able to show up here and give us that perspective. Definitely from a point of privilege, maybe on my side as the white male. But yeah, really, really, really appreciate it.
Scott, I appreciate that you have gone through the effort to put together this roster. I just want to say it very publicly. I was just pleased as punch to see you trying. I'm always pleased as punch to see people trying. And I think it's an excellent lineup. So great job.
Thanks. Yeah, I really appreciate it. Really appreciate it. Cool. So with that, we're going to just close things out really quickly here on this side. Again, we have another day tomorrow. So lots of speakers, 4 more on deck over our 2-hour period. Definitely invite you to come out and catch that stuff and make it available. If you can't make it, again, we'll have recordings and stuff afterwards. Encourage you to take the time to watch and learn a little bit on that side. We invite you to continue the conversation in our community as well. Comments, any questions, maybe things that our speakers want to know about, things that you can just want to start a conversation on some of these topics. We'd love to hear you, that discussion go on that side. There's also a post-event survey that will go out to you for anybody that attended today. We'd love you to fill that out. Again, really helpful for all our speakers and also helpful for us as event organizers and what we can do better and how we can learn from this. And again, continue to improve, as Adam talked about earlier in his session today. So again, thank you very much, everybody, for joining us. I know it's a bit of a remote, busy 2 hours, but we look forward to seeing you more tomorrow and joining the rest of our remaining 4 speakers and their sessions. Thanks again. Take care.